Welcome to Exploring A Course in Miracles. I'm Emily Perry with the Circle of Atonement, and I'm here with Circle founder Robert Perry. And today we are talking about freedom from the past. This is such an important episode, surely one of the most important that we've ever done, because it feels impossible to overstate just how utterly chained to the past that we are. And it's also impossible to overstate the damage that this does to our own mental health, the damage that it does to our relationships, and the damage it does to our world. And there are many different modalities that are available to relieve ourselves from the past. And as you may expect, the course has its own way through. There is obviously a lot that can be said about this topic, but for the limited amount of time that we have, Robert and I have narrowed it down to two categories: how the ego promises freedom from the past, and what's really going to get us there from a course perspective. And I have to say, if you are someone who feels bound by the past, if you can't seem to let go of things that have happened to you, if you wonder why you really want to change something in your life, but somehow you keep recreating the same relationship patterns and whatnot, you are going to want to listen to this conversation because there really is a way to free yourself from all of that. And I should also say that as we're recording this, we are just a couple of weeks away from the new year. And for members of the Circle's Course Companions program, Robert and I are going to be leading a 28-day forgiveness challenge where we will be going deeper into these ideas of how to finally let go of the grievances in our lives and all the anger and frustration that we hold around them, and step into the new year more loving and more peaceful and freeing ourselves of all of that baggage. We begin the 28-day forgiveness challenge on January 3rd, and it's free to members of our Course Companions program. So if you want to join us for that or learn more, you can go to coursecompanions.com. So, Robert, just getting into our topic for today, I mentioned that we've structured this discussion around the ego's version of freedom and what the Course says will really deliver it. And just getting started with the ego here, the Course says that the ego promises us freedom from the past, but all it really does is deliver repetition of the past. And there's a cycle for how this happens that we're all caught in to some degree without realizing it. So let's start with the broad strokes of what that cycle is, what the ego's cycle is, and then we'll get into the details of each part.
It's astonishing how well he knows us because what he portrays as the ego's program for freedom from the past is what basically we're following. It's what the vast majority of people are following. Okay, so there's like 5 steps. Number one, you carry into the present this story in which you were mistreated in the past, and that has defined you and basically caused your present. It's caused your makeup, it's caused your emotions, it's caused your present life. And then you carry that into the present and you see it happening all over again now. Okay. But this time you're ready. And this time you're going to turn the tables and make sure that you come out on top. That all sounds great. And that's most every story that we love. But the problem is the ego is tricking you into repeating your own past mistakes, which in the Course are attacks. This is a way to get you to do what you were doing throughout the past in the present. Okay. And that stacks up more unconscious guilt. And the guilt over that long series of mistakes projects a fearful future. You envision now a fearful future because you think all your past attacks are going to come home to roost someday.
So that's quite a cycle. And it starts, as you mentioned, with us carrying a story of how we've been mistreated in the past. And what we tend to tell ourselves is that this story is not only responsible for why we are the way that we are, but it's also responsible for why conditions in our life are the way that they are. And it's such a huge topic. You hardly even know where to begin with it. But I want to start with conventional self-help because this idea of I am the way I am because of what's happened to me in the past is so deep in our pores that we really just take it for granted as true, don't we?
We do. I think we've always had a story, long before, psychology as a discipline was founded, that, I've been hard done by, how I've been mistreated. The world hasn't been fair with me, right? If only I'd gotten what I truly deserved, gotten a fair shake. But I think that now that basic sentiment, it has gone into overdrive because all these psychological voices out there are there to tell us that, yes, only it's worse than you thought. You were really mistreated. You need to get in touch with that because that is the key to why you are the way you are.
And so much of that idea is reinforced in our culture. That's why it's so deep in our pores. And the course speaks to this in a section called The Question of Karma. The section is new to the CE. And it says patients in psychotherapy frequently go over their childhoods in some detail and at considerable expense. And it merely encourages their egos to become more tolerable to them. And I think in that passage, that's where you can see this idea at work, where we go to a therapist or we go into the self-help world, and what we get is validation of this idea that, yes, you're angry, for example, because your father was angry. And so then it's like, okay, well, I understand now why I'm angry. But it doesn't actually change anything. It just makes your anger more tolerable
Right. It
because now
says,
you know
well,
where it comes from. Go ahead.
exactly. Yeah. Now you know that it was kind of put in you by what was done to you. So it's not really yours. So, it's more acceptable, it's more tolerable. But this is just a huge part of human psychology. It's just that now it feels not just what we kind of carry, how we think, it feels like really cutting edge psychological wisdom.
Right. So we carry the past into the present through our stories of how we were mistreated. And the next step is that we see that thing that happened to us in the past happening again in the present. And this one is really interesting. And this is where I know I get super stuck personally. I think we throw the word trauma around a little too casually these days, but that doesn't mean that there isn't such a thing as trauma, where the emotional residue of a distressing experience is so painful and so heavy that it sticks with us. And I think a hallmark of true trauma is when the experience of the past constantly feels as if it's happening in the present, even though it's not.
That's a really good tie-in because that's kind of how they define trauma, right? If you feel like it's just constantly happening over again and the slightest little triggers make you feel like it's not past, it's present. And yet that's an extreme version of what the course is saying we're all doing. We're all carrying a sense of I've been treated unfairly, and we see it happening in the present all over again. We interpret the present from that past vantage point. And the course has, and we should do a podcast on this. someday. We did a workshop on it. Um, Maybe we've done a podcast, but the course has this whole philosophy called shadow figures. And shadow figures are the images we carry of particular people from our past who we felt particularly hurt by, unfairly treated by. We didn't get the love we wanted. And now we carry them around and we project them onto people we meet in the present. And I think this is a great deal of the course's whole idea of how we select romantic partners. We think, well, you remind me of that parent of mine that really didn't give me the love I needed, but you also look like maybe you could give it. And so we pick that person, project the image of our mother onto that person or whoever they remind us of. And then the course says we're actually, psychologically speaking, we're interacting with the past person in the present moment. We speak to them, not realizing it. We're speaking to them. And when the person in the present speaks to us, we hear the person from the past as if it's them speaking to us. So we're carrying all this, unfair treatment, at least in our perception, from the past, and then we bring it into the present and we're experiencing it happening all again in the present.
Yeah, there's a quote in the course in chapter 13 that says the shadowy figures from the past are precisely what you must escape. They carry the spots of pain in your mind. I love that phrase, spots of pain in your mind, directing you to attack in the present in retaliation for a past that is no more. And so there's that idea again. You're retaliating in the present against other people for the past that you're holding in your mind, even though it's not active in the present. You're punishing them for it, even though there's no direct connection.
Yeah. Well, and that's one thing the course says is that your present partners are being made to atone for what somebody else did.
Well, I want to dig into that a little bit because what if the person in front of you has hurt you in the past? And so you're not pulling in a shadow figure. You're not trying to pull from your partner the love you didn't get from your mom, but there's something that your partner has done and it's them, right?
Sure.
It's them. And you keep like bringing that past into the present and it's really affecting that relationship.
I think it's both. I mean, we've all got shadow figures from the past. We all have our little collection of ghosts in the attic that we're superimposing, on the people in the present. And the people in the present, they have egos. And so they're not going to behave perfectly lovingly, far from it. So both things are going on.
Okay. One other question on this before we move on. Where is the room for things that have really happened to us in the past that we bring into the present through true trauma experiences? I'm thinking about a girlfriend of mine whose husband did 3 tours in Iraq. And when he came back, he couldn't even be in family holidays anymore because his job in Iraq was to man the markets. And so a lot of noise caused him to go back to that place. And so we're about to get into a lot of self accountability here, but where is the place for just those kinds of situations where you just feel absolutely at the fact of what happened and it really wasn't any fault of your own?
Well, the course is not in any way denying that. The world is full of egos, right? All the minds in this world have egos, and the hallmark of the ego is attacking someone else for the sake of personal gain. That's what egos do. That you can watch the news, you can watch nature documentaries, anything, beyond anything that involves venturing outside of your bedroom. If you're alone, if you're not alone, it's happening there too. And you see egos do that. So of course your past is full. You got attacked. I mean, not that you were objective about what actually happened, but still, of course the world mistreats us. Of course, um, it's not fair in the conventional sense. You don't, the things you merit do not equal the what you get in return. Um, but from the course's standpoint, all of that could have been seen differently. It didn't need to hurt you if you perceived it correctly.
Right. And we're going to get to that, but
Yeah.
just continuing down the ego's promises of delivery. So we've been mistreated. We carry that mistreatment into the present. And the third step is we have now decided that we are going to turn the tables. We are going to, quote unquote, take back our power. This is something that we hear all the time. We're going to draw our boundaries, and we are not going to allow ourselves to be mistreated again. Now, that all sounds good. And you and I aren't even disagreeing that there's a place for that. But the course says that there is a major flaw in this plan. So let's talk about that.
Yeah, and I guess we don't want to just I don't think we should blanketly say there's a place for that. I mean, there's a certain place for certain elements in there done in a certain way. But basically, the idea that we're carrying is I got mistreated in the past, right? It wasn't fair. And it's almost like, and I like sports metaphors here, it's like I'm behind on the scoreboard, right? It's the fourth quarter and the refs calls have gone against me and the other team's playing dirty. Um, and so I'm behind, but now I'm going to turn the tables. I'm going to settle the score. I'm going to get ahead. This time I'm going to win. Um, and this is such a familiar story. I was looking up the definition of the term settle the score, just to see how that gets defined. And I found this great quote from Variety magazine. It's about movies. It says, sometimes the best movies often are the ones where the protagonist is seemingly defeated, gets a second lease on life, and returns in the final act to settle the score. That's our dream, right? We feel to some degree defeated. But if we get our courage together, if we take all that we've learned from the past about how the world works and how we can meet our own needs and all that, and we get some psychological wisdom in there about drawing our boundaries and dealing with our trauma, then we can turn the tables, and where we had been defeated, we can be victorious. And we celebrate those stories, don't we? We totally celebrate them. Now, the problem, which is going to loom larger as we go forward, is that all involves attack, right? First of all, as we saw with shadow figures, those shadow figures give you a license to attack in the present. If they've been doing that to you for decades, they've messed you up good, then you have a license to be something other than loving in the present. Um, and then all of that action whereby, you become the victor. You don't let them do it again. You don't let the bastards, I forget how that saying goes,
Get to you.
get to you,
Don't
right?
let the bastards get to you. That's
All
the saying.
okay, good. All of that. And in another context, I've enjoyed like that saying. Like I remember watching what was the Handmaid's Tale, and you're thinking, yeah, don't let them get to you. Um, but all of that involves attack, and that's going to come back to bite us as we go forward.
Well, one thing that you said in the past that I've always appreciated is that the hero is just the person who's wearing the cape. Superman is attacking. Superman is beating the hell out of people. But because he's wearing the cape, we're like, yeah, go. And because the other person or the other whoever he's fighting is a supposed bad guy, then we celebrate what he's doing, but it's really just attack. And based on that idea of like settling the score, I can see why you would say, well, let's not say that there's room for that. But I do want to be clear that there are times when you need to have boundaries with people in your life, and you do need to take care of yourself in certain ways, and I don't want to completely denigrate that. I think the point that we're making here is that there is ways to do that. There are ways to do that with a level of kindness. And what we're really trying to encourage people to do is to pay attention to the ways that what we call taking back our power, what we call setting boundaries, is just the same old, same old. It's the hand made into the same
Right.
old attack that has got us in this place in the first place.
Yeah, let me
Um,
just say, I think the thing to watch out for is that universally beloved narrative of you are the persecuted hero. You didn't get your just due in the past, but you're going to gather all of your strength and courage and tools and wisdom and moxie and friend support, and you're going to turn the tables. And now you're going to emerge victorious. That is so seductive. We celebrate that. And the Course is saying that's the ego's way and it's doomed to fail.
right. So here's where we're really going with this, is just this idea that we need to get honest about the fact that so often what we call taking back our power and drawing boundaries is just our own form of attack. We should really look at how we attack in order to prevent ourselves from being attacked, or so we tell ourselves. But all that that does is keep this cycle of attack going, and that's what's caused the conditions of our world. So there's the outright attacks, but then there's all these other, like, more sneaky forms of it. So as an example, if I withdraw from you, I might not be thinking, well, that's an outright attack. I'm just withdrawing. I'm trying to prevent myself from being attacked. But anyone who's been withdrawn from knows that that's a form of attack. It hurts. And so this leads us to our fourth step, where we think that we're, again, taking back our power, when really all that's happening here is the ego's tricking us into more attack.
Right. So the thing we've kind of alluded to but haven't really gone into is that the Course's story of our pain is that the root of it is our attack. We don't think that way in our culture. Course in Miracle students generally don't think that way either. No one likes to think that way. But what the Course's teaching says is that we've been attacking all along. That those attacks have generated guilt, mostly on an unconscious level. And the guilt is a deep belief that says you deserve to suffer. You've got it coming to you. At some point, it's going to find you. And when it does, it'll be justice. The chickens will come home to roost. You'll get your comeuppance. And so then we not only live in fear of those chickens coming home to roost, but we impose suffering on ourselves. The Course says that all illness is guilt being projected onto the body so that we cause our own body to suffer as payment for all those past attacks. So the whole point of that wonderful hero narrative, where I get to do some pretty badass things because of what was done to me, so that now when I do them, they're heroic. And now I become the victor over my terrible circumstances, and everyone can celebrate my story. The Course says basically the ego is just getting you into that narrative so that you'll feel justified in doing more attacking. And then what that does is it just perpetuates the past. And what a great little bait and switch there, where the ego says, I can tell you exactly how to get free of the past. Just follow this. And you're like, yeah, that feels good. And all it does is it leads to a repetition of the past and what the Course calls the continuity of past, present, and future.
And again, it's amazing how much of this idea is culturally supported. You and I, just going back to this idea of movies, you and I watched the whole Kill Bill series with your son recently. And by the end of it, you're like rooting for her to kill all these people because it's revenge for all the ways in which she has been horribly attacked and
The amount of
mistreated.
people she mows through is quite astonishing,
Right. And so my point is that it
but
just
it's
kind of
heroic.
seeps into our pores. And so we end up in our own versions, our own mini versions of that story in our life. You know, somebody treated us poorly and now we're on a revenge tour and we're doing it overtly to certain people, but we're also doing it subtly to others. And we don't even realize how caught we are in this trap.
Yeah, and
So,
just I know this is belaboring it, but just about anybody who's attacking and you see him attacking, and I've even thought of this with like nature shows with the carnivores, like the leopards and the cheetahs. Um, when you see him attacking, you think, why are they doing that? They're terrible. They're awful. I hope the gazelle gets away. I hope the law hunts that guy down. But then all you gotta do is give him a backstory, even an imaginary one. Give him a backstory in which, you know, the chips are down. They've been horribly treated. They are in a famine trying to feed their poor cubs, or the murderer had this awful child. Suddenly you start to think maybe I should celebrate the attack.
all that attack is justified at that
Yeah,
point. Yeah, that's a
yeah,
really good point. Give them a backstory and all those behaviors that we were like, wait a second, before all of a sudden become justified, but it's the same old behaviors.
yeah.
Good. All right. So moving on. So because we're attacking, we feel guilty and then we think that we are going to be attacked in return. And so this is what sets us up to be afraid and fearful in our lives. This is basically how we spend our lives. And so that's the end of our ego cycle here. Our guilt over attacking in our past means that we project a future in which we have every reason to be afraid. And that's basically how we're living.
And guess what? When we project that future where we have every reason to be afraid, we have more cause to attack. And it keeps going and going. And to me, the evidence, I mean, the course is relying on unconscious things here, right? We aren't super aware of how attacking we are. We're not very aware at all of how guilty we feel. We're not, I think, at all aware, except for like maybe 1% of how our guilt ends up producing fear. So it's relying on unconscious things, and you're thinking, well, I mean, is all that true? One thing I think we know is true is that most people don't change very much at all. Even the course says the continuity of behavior is one of the most fundamental principles of psychology. People's behavior tends to be the same over time. How is it we're all trying so hard to change? Or at least, outside of spirituality and self-help, we're trying to at least change our lives. How is it that after all the efforts at change, people pretty much stay the same? Spiritual people pretty much stay the same.
Well, how could we not stay the same being stuck in this cycle where the ego promises us freedom from the past, but all it does is trick us into repeating the behaviors of the past, and then we stay stuck, but at the same time we're like, wait a second, I want to change, but see, nothing ever changes. And so we're in this constant spin cycle, wondering what's going on when we're the ones recreating the cycle that keeps us stuck.
Yeah. I know we
But
have to move on. It's just
yeah,
such juicy stuff, because I've looked at myself, I've looked at other spiritual people I know, and the fact is that we tend to do the same stuff. If we attacked a certain way 20 years ago, under the same circumstances, we tend to do that now. Why so much repetition?
because we're stuck and we're not honest with ourselves about the reason why we're stuck.
Yeah. Okay.
But we can get out of that cycle. There's another cycle that we want to talk to you about because this is where the course promises us true freedom. And so the same idea applies here. The ego's got its cycle and the course has its own cycle of freedom. So let's start with the big picture of what the course says will deliver us freedom from the past, and then we'll go into the individual pieces again.
Okay, so the beginning place for the course is that we need to realize the past is truly gone. It's gone to the point where it no longer exists. It is a non-existent thing. And then we enter fully into the present, and everyone is about being in the present these days. But the course's idea of what it means to be in the present is radically different. And we'll talk about that. Then in the present, we make a new choice, a choice that doesn't fit the past patterns. And that's key. Making in the present is where you choose. Nothing's going to change unless we make a new choice. And the ego's whole approach is trying to get us into thinking there's no new choice to be made. One can't be made. One shouldn't be made. The key here in the course's approach is making that new choice. And then from that new choice is born a new future. The course says the future is always an extension of the present. If we just repeat the past in the present, we get the same old, same old. But if we make a new choice in the present, a new future extends from that.
Right. So this first step of realizing that the past is over is huge in the course. I think many students are familiar with lesson 289 in the workbook. The past is over, it can touch me not. So, how does the course want us to think about the past? And how does it fit into the idea that you touched on earlier that we feel like we have to hold on to the past in order to learn the lessons from it?
Yeah. Well, the course is all about learning lessons. It just wants us to learn different lessons than we tend to learn. Um, the main thing the course wants us to understand is that the past is gone. It's over, meaning it's non-existent. Um, and things that don't exist don't have any power. So from the course's standpoint, the power of the past can't be in the past itself. It's only in our carrying of it. It's only if we carry it with us that it seems to have power, but we're the ones giving it power in the present. One of my favorite lines, this is something that, is new to the CE. It's from that question of karma section, but it puts it so well. It says, whenever we move from one instant to the next, the previous one no longer exists. And everyone talks about the past being over. I remember watching my dad on the dating game when I was like 20. And he was
People
like,
don't know that about you. You just
yeah, really super important fact. And he was like, they asked him something that involved the past. He's like, the past is over. Just now is now. And at the end, the woman chose him. And the reason she gave was he wants it now. Isn't that great?
I can't believe you share that. That's
So
hilarious.
so anyway, the point is that we all say the past is over, but we don't go so far as to think it no longer exists, and things that don't exist have no causative power. That's extreme.
Well, I think where we get stuck goes back to what you were saying a minute ago about the best way to predict someone's future behavior is to look at what they've done in the past. And so we feel like we have to hold on to what they've done in the past to shield ourselves from what they might do in the future. And so again, this is one of those areas where we just kind of have to hold two ideas as true at the same time. I love a line in the course that says, you are not guiltless in time, but in eternity.
Hmm.
And so from that standpoint, we can say, okay, well, this person has done this thing and it hurt me. That happened in time. But fortunately, there is another way to look at it. I can see who they are in their true nature. I can see who they are in eternity and not find myself so bound and chained by what they did in the past. So I can see them both ways. I can
Yeah.
see, okay, yeah, this thing happened, but it's not ultimately true. And there's real freedom in that idea.
Yeah, and that's going to be extremely central for this whole thing. But I think let's just say it. I mean, if they did those things in the past, the odds are they're going to do them in the present, they're going to do them in the future, and you are naive if you're counting on that not being the case. They can always make a new choice. They can break the past patterns, but the odds are they won't. And if you're counting on them doing it all differently, something's wrong with you, right? You're being very naive. So let's hope that we have a basis for being free of their past actions and being free of fear of their future actions that does not involve them changing their behavior because they probably won't.
Well, yeah and no. I mean, we're going to get to this, but maybe you want to say more about it now because there are, yeah, we have relationships where no matter what we do, they're just going to hold on to whatever they're holding on to and the relationship doesn't change. But then there are also times where because we make a new choice in the present, we act with more love, then it brings something out of them and it does actually
That's
create
true.
a new future.
That's a
And
really good
so
point.
you really want to make room for all of it because, yeah, some people don't change, but also some people can change as a result of your kindness and your choice to love in the moment.
Really good point. Yeah, thanks for filling that in.
All right. So next comes the idea that is all throughout the course, which is that we can release the past by fully entering into the present. And this is something that we hear about all the time. I used to share this idea to no end when I was teaching mindfulness. But the course, as you were referencing before, Robert, has a very different idea about what it means to fully step into the present. So let's talk about that.
We need to, because you're right. Everyone talks these days about being in the present, being in presence, all of it. And what we mean by that, we know, right? It's feeling the grass crunching under your feet, it's feeling the wind on your face, it's listening to the waves, or just, in a more kind of normal sense, it means being really present to what's happening right now, meaning what's happening in form. It's about the sensory present, whether it's the grass and the wind and the waves, or whether it's what that body is saying to you right now. That's what we think of as being in the present. But the Course has, as I said, a radically different idea of what being in the now is. From the Course's standpoint, being in the present means being present to what's truly real. And that is a non physical reality that is timeless, that is unaffected by the passage of time. It's not based on past history. Past history doesn't have any effect on it at all. So, we live in a realm of form where everything in form is the product of the past, right? If we were talking about how if the asteroid hadn't hit 66 million years ago, dinosaurs would probably still be around. We wouldn't be here. There'd be no skyscrapers and cars, or unless they were driven by dinosaurs. So anyway, in form, it's all a product of the past, but being in the present in the Course sense is being present to the fact that to your brother's reality beyond his body, to your reality beyond your body. And the key thing is that reality, your brother's reality or sister's reality, is not defined by their past behavior, by their past mistakes. Your reality is not defined by your past mistakes. Um, so that's when the Course talks about being in the now, being in the present, we can automatically fill in all that stuff that we hear from everywhere else. But what the Course means is not being present to the sights and sound and touch of all these forms right now. It's being present to the spiritual reality that lies beyond them.
Yeah, and that idea isn't unique to the course. There are paths that talk about the pure reality being present to what is ultimately real. But I love this distinction that is made between what it means to step into the present as we conventionally think of it. The way that I used to teach it in mindfulness is you're fully present to what's happening right now in front of you. And it goes back to that idea of you're aware of the wind blowing against your face, you're aware of the sun outside, you're aware of the coffee that you're holding in your hand, and all, and they're not, those things are really nice, but it's not, it's still going to chain you to form. It's going to chain you to gratification based on little things like that. And it's and that's going to block you from what the course is asking you to do, which is to see beyond those things to what is the ultimate reality of the other person. And that's what it's defining as being fully present. And that's a
Right.
beautiful concept.
Yeah. And yeah, of course there are echoes and similarities out there, but what we hear about being in the present typically is what you were talking about. And this is so different.
Right. Well, this leads us to our next step, which is when we can fully see the true reality of the present, then we have the power to make a new choice. We have the power to make a new choice that doesn't follow in the patterns of the past. And there's a quote I can't resist reading here from chapter 13 that says, linking the future to the past is the ego's law. And for whatever reason, when I was preparing for this podcast and thinking about this idea of like we can be in the present and make a new choice, what chains us to the past is the ego. It's the ego's law that we be
Hmm.
chained to the past.
Hmm.
And so if we can see it that way, we have the foundation for breaking that law, transitioning from the ego's laws to God's laws. So what do you want to say about this final step?
Well, this is really where it, mainly happens. I want to say a bit first about making a new choice. Uh, in each moment, we can make a new choice. I think in one of our recent podcasts, maybe on karma, I told the story of Helen's dream of the recorder. And the recorder is this guy that records everyone's deeds. And Helen's like, how's my, account looking? And he's like, it's pointless to speculate because up until the very last moment, someone is quite capable of making a choice which changes everything. And I think our ego's afraid of that. Our ego is afraid of the freedom to make a new choice in the moment.
Can I just say real quickly, I know you want to go on, but that right there goes to the idea that we should never completely give up on other people because we never know when they may actually change their behavior as a result of a choice that we have made in the present. And so I just don't want anyone listening to think, yeah, that's right. What this person did in the past means that they're forever going to behave that way, and therefore I am justified in giving up on them. I don't think we should ever give up on people, but I do think we should be aware of how past behavior can be a predictor of future patterns.
Yeah, let's be realistic. One form of realism is everyone can make a new choice in the present. It happens. Okay. The other side of realism is let's not be naive and assume they're going to do that. So yeah, I totally agree. Okay. So the whole point of our ability to make a new choice in the present is so important. And we should do a podcast on choice and free will at some point. Because that it gets undercut from different sides. The scientific side says there is no free will. And then the non-dual side says generally that there's no free will and there's no chooser. It just things just arise. The Course says you're a son of God and you have the power of choice, and nothing can take that from you. Um, and the main thing, the content of the choice we make is to realize that we are not defined by our past mistakes, and mainly to realize they aren't defined by their past mistakes. We see people like Marley's ghost from Christmas Carol as if they're carrying along, dragging along all these chains of their past mistakes, and that's how we see them. And from the Course's standpoint, yep, they made a ton. They're making them right now. They're going to keep making them to some degree, at least. And we need to see them as free of all that. And this is the most important part of entering into the now, because in the real now, they have a timeless reality as the Son of God, as Christ. And that's forgiveness in the Course. To see somebody as the Son of God, free of all their past mistakes, to see them as God created them, that's forgiveness in the Course. When we see them that way, genuinely, in a heartfelt way, we can set them free from their past. We can enter into what the Course calls a holy encounter, which was the focus of our live event in Sedona recently. And that's how we reverse the attacks of the past. So we had this pattern of attacking over time in subtle ways, usually, not so subtle always. Um, the way we reverse that in the present is we see the timeless reality of the person. That's forgiveness. We see them as not defined by their past mistakes. And now, having reversed our own past mistakes, the Course says the atonement comes in, kind of flushes them out of our minds, heals our mind of the lingering residue of those past mistakes. And now the miracle has intervened between the past and the future, and something truly new has entered in.
Mhm. It's such an incredible idea. And I think when we hear it, there's just that veil of truth in us that kind of melts at the concept of seeing the true reality of the other person, and then we forgive and things open up to a new future. Um, the problem is that the ego gets in the way of that. And I think this is where we have to recognize that we have our own behavioral patterns that are driven by our ego. And we have to recognize that the ego is very active in our life, and the ego's goal is to keep us separated from other people and thus keep us separated from love. And to really flush that out, we have to go through a process of learning to distinguish the ego's voice in our mind, to get to dissociate from it, to get some distance from it. And I just want to point out that one of the hallmarks of this, of being chained to the past, is when um, well, actually, I'll just give you an example. You've said that I'm sometimes hard to compliment, because you'll pay me a compliment and I'll be like, well, yeah, but you didn't think that before, or something like that. And that's
That would never happen.
that's the kind of thing to be aware of, because that's what I was saying before about the ego's laws to keep us chained to the past. As long as you're chained to the past, you're chained to the ego. And so you just have to kind of see what's going on there if you want to break that pattern, because you'll never get to the beauty of the Course's ideas unless you dissociate from the ego's voice in your mind.
You know what I'm thinking? Maybe I should save this for the end, but I'll probably forget it by then. Um, like the choice is really stark. Do I look at you and see you as a bundle of all your past mistakes? But I tell myself this time I'm going to stop her. This time I'm going to win. That's one choice. The other way is I realize you're not that bundle of your past mistakes. You are as God created you. So this time I'm going to see that. This time I'm going to forgive. and I'm going to set you free and me free as well. It's really stark difference. And the
Mhm.
first is so seductive.
Yeah, it is. It is. I know. I get it. But we need to reverse that association. Like the seductive thing needs to be this final point, which is when we make a new choice, a new future is born. You know, we can get stuck in dragging the past into the present and then just recreating the past, or we can drop the past, recognize that in the present we can make a new choice and give ourselves a new future. So, what do you want to say about that last idea?
Well, this is a huge focus in the course. I think most course students have recognized that the idea of, you know, getting free of the past in the present and thus releasing the future or having a new future extend from that new choice in the present is just a huge theme in the course. Course talks about us being born again, talks about others being born again to us as we choose to see them differently, talks in many places about Christ, our true self, being born again to us using Christmas imagery, talks about resurrection. There's a great line in the manual that says rebirth is man's inheritance. Like we can experience rebirth. We can experience a new future, and the course loves talking about that new future being one where all the fear is behind us in the past. You know, all the guilt is behind us. The shadows are behind us. And wouldn't we love that? But the
Hmm.
only way to get there is not to follow that conventional narrative where other people are that bundle of their mistakes. That bundle has truly victimized us, but this time we're turning the tables and we're going to be victorious. That is the path of repetition and death.
Yeah. And there's so much real freedom in that idea that you can say to yourself, I don't have to recreate those past patterns that I'm doing, not that the other person's doing, that I'm doing. And when I don't recreate those past patterns, then I make a better choice in the present and thus create a better future. But I think I've said this before, but um, my favorite book outside of the course is Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. And when I was teaching mindfulness, my go-to, one of my go-tos was his quote in that book, between stimulus and response, there is a space, and it's in that space you choose how you wish to respond. And everyone loves that idea. There is a lot of freedom and a lot of power in that idea. But why I left mindfulness and went for the course is because what you insert in that space matters. And so it's not just what I was teaching in mindfulness was like, you need to make a choice to be kind in this moment. And there's something to be said for that. That's amazing. But the course just takes it so much further. You're in the space between stimulus and response, you're putting a picture of this other person as who they are, as God created them. And that's
Right.
the basis
Right.
on which you make your decisions. And then, I mean, that's mind blowing. And then a new future opens up to you. So it's not just that you're trying to be kind. That's great. There's a lot to be said. We need a lot more of that in the world.
Yeah. Yeah.
But the course, as it usually does, just takes it so much further.
Yeah. I mean, in that, I like the space too. It's just so crucial what you're supposed to fill it with, what you're supposed to
Right.
do in it. And in that space in the course, you can make a truly new choice that steps outside your past patterns and that chooses to see that person as really a being without a past, as a timeless divine being, not defined by their past. And that's a radically different choice. I think a lot of what I feel when I hear mindfulness teachings is I don't have to believe anything different about reality to
And that's
accept
the
these
appeal of
teachings.
it for a lot of people,
Right,
because they don't have to
right,
believe in anything like God.
right. But in the course, there is that space. You have a choice in that space, but the only way to make the right choice is to believe in a shining, pristine, untarnished reality beyond what your eyes see.
Beautiful concept. There's a line in chapter 14 that is very well known to course students that says, "I will not use my own past learning as the light to guide me now." And I think if we can just as core students hold on to that idea, like not using your past learning as the light to guide you, but using what you know to be true about the fundamental nature of ourselves and other people, and using that as the light to guide us. And then we really will create a new future for ourselves and other people.
Okay, we did start a little bit late, so we have a couple minutes. Um, you've been sharing about how you feel like, you often are rooted in the past and you want to be free of that. Like,
Are you putting me on the spot?
I am. I
Okay.
mean, you can return the favor. What's your
All right.
takeaway about freedom from the past from this discussion?
For me, I mean, what I was saying earlier about the big teaching of the course about seeing past the body, seeing past the other person's ego to the truth of who they really are, is a knee-bucklingly beautiful concept. And yet, you can't get to it if you are chained to your egoic patterns. And so for me, it's kind of super grounded in trying very hard to dissociate what is me from that egoic voice in my mind. And that's where I'm at right now. You can only sort of be where you are. And that's where I'm at. That's a big focus for me right now, because that voice, the egoic voice in my head, is relentlessly chained to the past. And what it wants to do is to constantly bring the past into the present. And it's telling me that I'm protecting myself from what could happen in the future. But what it's really doing is putting distance between me and whoever it is that I'm trying to connect with. And so I get stuck in those cycles of not changing, but just recreating the past. And so what I'm taking from this is just a really simple conclusion that we don't have to do that. We do not have to do that. We have power in our minds for a reason. And the Course says that we have the power of God behind us when we make choices for Him. And so we don't have to lean on our own past learning. We don't have to lean on our own understanding. We can lean on His truth to see our way through. And that's what I'm taking from this.
I'll just briefly add my own part here. I think this is asking me to like leave this view in which every person is trailing along this long past that defines them. Everything is trailing that past. I am, my life is. Everything's got that long, long tail in the past that really makes it what it is. Stepping out of that and just realizing, no, there is a timeless reality to you. There is a timeless reality to me. And that's what matters. That's what's actually real. And making that more important than the other.
I'll just say one last thing before we close, because this perspective has also been really helpful to me as well. Um, Last year, I think it was last year, or maybe it was the year before, when you got COVID, we both got COVID, but it really kind of took you down harder than it took me down.
Yeah.
And I remember having this moment where I was like, if you were to get really sick, would I be proud of the way in which I'm treating you in this moment? Would I be proud of the way of the where our relationship is in this moment? And what that has done for me is something planted in me where it was like, gosh, life really is impermanent. We're not guaranteed tomorrow. And so why would I hold all of the past? Why would I bring that into the present? Why don't I just be grateful for what's happening now, for who you are now. Anyway, my point is that I do think that it's macabre to think about death, but at the same time, there's a beauty to that idea as well, because when we think we're not guaranteed tomorrow, then it, for me at least, it pulls more love out of me in the present and in the day.
Mm.
So, okay, well, anything else you want to say before we close?
No, it's a really rich. I feel like this is so rich, and we've just like blown through it at 65 miles an hour. So I think, we need to close it up, but there's so
Yeah.
much here.
Yeah, well, thank you, Robert, as always, for this discussion. Thank you to everyone who has joined us live. If you want to participate in a live Exploring a Course in Miracles podcast recording, you can find the link for that in our free community at community.circleofa.org. And please don't forget that we are starting a 28-day forgiveness challenge in January that is free to members of our Course Companions program, and you can learn more about Course Companions at coursecompanions.com. On behalf of Robert and I and all of us at the Circle, thank you so much for listening, and bye for now.